He finished his morning routine, brushed his teeth, combed his hair, put on deodorant. His dad had insisted that sixth grade wasn't too early to start, and then he headed down the stairs. His dad was ready and waiting with cinnamon Pop Tarts on paper plates and lunches packed. Don't forget your backpack. It's not too heavy, is it? I read an article the other day about heavy backpacks and pre adolescent spine development. He's fine. Theo tossed his pack into the back seat of the car and slid into the passenger seat beside his dad. Seatbelt, buddy. Theo stared out his window and watched the houses and trees passing by. Check. He imagined himself as the vanisher, running beside them, bouncing off roofs, swinging from trees, balancing on telephone wires. He imagined spreading his cape, catching the wind to keep up with the speeding car. It was a trick his mum had taught him to do to keep calm when he felt like the world was crashing in around him. She had known all about the vanisher because she'd known everything about Theo, all his thoughts, all his interests, all his fears. But he wasn't the vanisher, and the vanisher wasn't going to protect him from Asher. Neither was his mum. It had been 2 years since she'd died. The brain and lung damage from her car accident had been too much. Theo, his dad's voice shook him from his musing. You okay? Yeah, just zoned out. Hey buddy, everything's going to be okay. We've talked about this before. Remember what I've told you. There's no need to stand out in a crowd. If they can't find you, they can't hurt you. That's right. Stay invisible, Theo, and Asher won't hurt you. It's how I made it through middle school and high school. It's a little hard sometimes since we go to such a small Christian school, Dad, and there's lunch, and I have to pass through the 8th grade hall to get to art, and I know, his dad sighed. There will always be bullies, Theo. Bullies prey on the small. It's what they've done since the beginning of time. It's a part of life. You can't help that you're small. So the best thing to do is stay out of their way. True enough. Still, it was unfair that Asher never got into trouble for bullying kids at school. The teachers looked the other way to keep their jobs because Asher's father also happened to be the principal. Not only that, but he was nearly as much of a bully as Asher. At least, that's how Theo saw it. Following his own advice to keep clear of any trouble, his dad didn't eat in the teacher's lounge. He never went to the office unless he was called, and he avoided the principal like Theo avoided the monkey house at the zoo. His dad pulled into the school parking lot and then put the car in park. I have an idea. How about we hit the comic book shop after school? See what's new. The only word Theo heard was hit, and it further confirmed what was to come. Asher. He nodded, forced a smile, climbed from the car, slung his not too heavy backpack over his shoulder, and started walking. Stay invisible. The grocery store is a few blocks south. I could spend the day there. Then again, if his dad found out he'd skipped school, not only would he be grounded from video games for the rest of his life, but he would receive an hour lecture on the dangers of going to the store alone. Dangers like possible kidnapping, jail time, broken bones, contracting incurable illnesses. Besides, who was Theo kidding? He was too afraid of skipping school and running off by himself. Theo had no choice but to try and stay invisible. But how do you stay invisible from someone who's most likely hunting you down? Don't worry, Ash's bark is bigger than his bite. Stay invisible, okay? Okay, Theo said, but he knew it wasn't going to be okay. He appreciated his dad's attempt to connect on his level, but the attempts didn't stop the thoughts from invading his mind. Maggot. Theo opened the double doors. The hall was empty with the exception of a few other teachers' kids who had to arrive early. He exhaled in relief. Theo grabbed what he needed from his locker and headed to his classroom. Mrs. Bailey, Theo's favourite teacher, was there as always preparing for the day's lesson. He looked forward to her class. Not that 6th grade language art was his favourite. However, he loved to read. Mrs. Bailey challenged him to dig deeper, understand the words. discover what the author was really trying to say. And she never made him feel dumb for not knowing the answer. Hello, Theodore. Early as usual. She peeked over her shoulder and then returned to the dry erase board. I've got new books on the shelf just for you. I figured those old ones were getting a little dull. Thanks, Mrs. B. Anything for my early bird. Theo made his way to the back of the room and plumped down at his desk, thankful for this hour where he didn't have to worry about Asher, but praying for the day to end quickly, even though it had hardly begun. Because when the bell rang, Asher would be in the hall, somewhere among the hordes of other 8th graders looking for him. How was Theo to stay invisible on his way to his second-hour art class? Maggot. Theo controlled his breathing. In, out. In, out, trying to calm himself. Good morning, Mrs. Bailey. Annalie White stepped into the classroom. Theo hardly knew Annalie, but he liked her. There was something about Annalie that made him momentarily forget his fear. But then his thoughts were back on Asher. Student after student filed in until all the metal desks were full. Theo didn't hear the morning announcements and only caught bits and pieces of Mrs. Bailey's instruction on the proper use of pronouns. Stay invisible. How? Walk around with a book in front of my face all day? No, you can't hide being small. Pass out from the odour of the obviously deodorant-free kid next to me and sleep in the nurse's office? Nah. Pretend I have the stomach flu and spend the day in the bathroom stall? Nah. Pretending to throw up was as bad as throwing up. But the bathroom wasn't such a bad idea. There was plenty of light, not too small, smelled a bit, but he would deal with it for the short amount of time he planned to be there. He'd leave the class early and hide in the bathroom until second hour. Then show up late to his class. They would count him as tardy, but he wouldn't be absent. It could work. It was definitely better than Asher finding him in the hallway. Theo watched the clock on the wall tick past the minutes of class while Mrs. Bailey went on about The Hobbit. He had already read it 3 times and he'd seen the movie. Stay invisible. When there were only 5 minutes left in the period and Mrs. Bailey paused somewhere between Bilbo and the Shire, he lifted his hand. Yes, Theo. May I use the restroom? Mrs. Bailey cast a glance at the clock, hesitated and then nodded. Be quick, I'm about to give homework. Theo stepped up to the front of the class, past Annalie, grabbed the giant block of wood with the word bathroom carved into it and slipped out into the hall. Empty. His plan would work. Asher and his goons never went to the boys' bathroom in the 6th grade hall. What 8th grader would? Besides, everyone in the school knew those boys staked their claim on the boys' locker room in the gymnasium. Theo's sneakers squeaked as he turned the corner. The bathroom was in sight. Just a few more steps and then freedom till the tardy bell rang. Safety was so close. He picked up his pace. The plan was perfect. He could come to the bathroom before and after lunch too. Asher would never see him. Stay invisible. His dread of the day began to melt away. Hey, maggot! The voice cut through the silence, sending chills down Theo's spine. Asher. There they are. That's pretty horrible, isn't it? Just like horrible. Chapter 2. If it isn't my favourite little bug. Didn't I tell you not to show your face today? Theo slowly turned toward Asher. The bully towered over Theo with hands the size of basketballs and more facial hair than any 8th grader Theo had ever seen. He was a middle school anomaly, a teenager in the body of a man, a replica of his father, Hank, in high-top tennis shoes and a football jersey for a team Theo had never heard of, and now the anomaly stood 10 feet away, glaring at Theo. Maybe he could reason with Asher. I thought since this is the 6th grade hall, They're all my halls, maggot, Asher growled. Wasn't very smart of you to show up today, was it? I warned you, so now you know what comes next. Asher's long legs clomped forward, hands balled into fists. Teo's feet wouldn't move. You know, I'm a man of my word. I never break a promise. The bully grinned, exposing a chipped front tooth. This was one of those moments, those crashing world moments he and his mother had talked about. He tried to imagine himself as the vanisher, but all he saw was Ash's fist rearing back. The second hour bell rang, freeing Teo's mind and then his feet. He spun around and ran. Ash's feet stomped behind him as classroom doors flung open and students eagerly moved from one class to the next. But Theo didn't stop. Neither did Asher. Theo rounded a corner, pushing his body harder than he ever had in the gym class. The cafeteria doors were in sight. If he could just pass through those doors and fall into the arms of some unsuspecting lunch lady, maybe then he'd be safe. Surely Asher wouldn't hit a woman in a hairnet. Theo wouldn't put it past him, though. He'd heard worse rumours. Theo held his breath, pumping his arms, bathroom key securely in his left hand. Theo stopped short in front of the cafeteria, no longer hearing Asher's feet pounding on the tiles. Carefree students moved back and forward through the halls, closing lockers, carrying books. Where was Asher? It didn't matter. Theo was too afraid to go back and look. He needed to sit and think. He pushed open the cafeteria doors and ran straight into one of Asher's goons. Thomas McGee, buzz-headed and toothy grin. Billy Kirby, red-headed, smelled like cheeseburgers. And Philip Carter, lanky, freckled, and hadn't paid for his lunch since the first day of 7th grade. He had a way of making other people pay. They were all here for him. Theo glanced over his shoulder, thinking he should run back the way he came. But Asher was now leaning on the locker behind him, hitting his fist repeatedly into his hands. Hold him, boys. Thomas and Philip grabbed Theo's arms and held him tight. Asher pushed himself off the locker, stepped forward, and paced in front of Theo. You make this so easy, you know, like catching a mouse with broken legs. Might be more fun if you made it a bit more of a challenge. It would be more fun, Billy snarled, circling around Theo like a hungry hyena. Was I asking you, doofus? Asher snapped. Billy cowered. Asher planted his feet in front of Theo, cocked his head, and glared at him with mocking pity. You know, this is your own doing, maggot. If you weren't so easily scared, this wouldn't be any fun. But you're always going to be a scared little twerp who hides in the bathroom. It was as if Asher had uncovered his secret plan. Theo's stomach churned a mixture of Pop-Tarts and nerves. Prickles of anxiety climbed up his neck. Terror forced tears to pool in his eyes. Please, Asher, Theo breathed. I tried, but my dad made me come. Do you hear that, boys? His daddy made him come. You know what my dad always says? Do you? Theo shook his head. He says there's only one way to toughen up snivelling maggots like you. Asher pulled back his fist and slammed it into Theo's nose. Theo's head snapped back, pulling him to the floor. I just did you a favour. Theo gasped for air. Asher and his goons came back into focus, pointing and laughing. Pain radiated behind his eyes and across his face. He lay on the floor like a stuffed doll, waiting for someone to kick him. Theo forced himself to roll to his side, the tile floor cool on his throbbing cheek. He blinked, focusing on the double doors. He couldn't stay on the floor. Asher would hit him again.